Okay, welcome everybody to our special school board meeting to discuss the discussion paper that's been out in the field for about a month now. I'm Susan Barr, I'm the school board chair. Welcome. So this is kind of an interesting meeting that we're going to have because, well, first I'd like to say that we started out, Tom pointed out that probably some people noticed that we've been meeting a little earlier today, and what we've been talking about since 5 o'clock actually is planning with respect to our budgets for the coming year. We are looking at a deficit, perhaps a sizable deficit, and so we've been talking about how to consult with the public with respect to that to see what their thoughts are. We are having a partner group meeting on April the 7th to talk about that with our partner groups. And we do invite them to send representatives to our meeting. We hope to have a list of possible things we may consider spending additional funds on, and a list of things that perhaps we would consider cutting. And we would really appreciate any feedback that we receive from the public with respect to those. So we've already been at work for a couple hours. Now we'll talk about the discussion paper. This will be an interesting meeting in that we haven't had a discussion with regards to the discussion paper yet. So I, for one, am dying to hear what everyone has to say about this and to see where we get to this evening. We've talked about process things, and my hope is that everyone will take an opportunity tonight to say what sources they've consulted in coming to the conclusions or thoughts that they have, so that the public clearly knows what we're relying on when we're coming to our conclusions. Also, I think it's important for us to have this real discussion in the public's eye, so you know how this thing is shaping up and you know why we think the way we do on items. What tonight is not, is it's not going to be a meeting where we're going to make a decision really about what configuration the school district is going to have or what changes are going to occur. Tonight we're just going to have a discussion with respect to what we think about what we've heard from the public, about what is contained in the discussion paper, and then sort of take it from there. So, that being said, does anyone want to start by making some comments on this daunting topic?
So just a point of clarification around decision making. We're looking at April 24th, because that was cited in the discussion paper as or not April 24th.
Yeah, the 28th. At our public board meeting on the 28th. Okay, I've called the meeting to order. Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. There's one item on the agenda, being the discussion of the discussion paper. Are there any additions? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, who would like to start?
Well, I'll make a general comment. I guess how I sort of envision it is making a couple of statements. I have not a prepared text, but I got some cheat sheets that I'm going to refer to when I do sort of the body of my thinking. But I want to talk a little bit about this discussion paper process and how it's sort of played out for me. I had an expectation when we offered to do this that I guess, or that we would as a board would receive, actually dealt with a fair amount of extreme views at one end of the spectrum or the other. And I'll paraphrase, that basically they get your head out of the sand and move it back, or get your head out of the sand and leave it alone. And we got like none of that, really. And I'm really impressed by that. The continuum of opinion is very much that. It's, I mean, as we all read, it's a continuum. It's that. But I was exceedingly impressed with the well over 200 submissions that we received from students, from employees, regardless of where they happen to sit within the district, and certainly from parents. Really well thought out ideas. So I don't recall actually any that I read where I concluded with a, what's that all about? I mean, I got it all. And so I give a fair amount of credit, if not all of the credit, to the people who took the time, which is clearly was taken, to give some meaningful thought to it. Now, would it have been a lot nicer as a trustee if everybody would have ended up on the same spot? Well, yeah, but I certainly didn't expect that of any of this stuff. But it certainly was instructive, and I hope when I get to the body of my views, that will be reflected, that I've taken a look at there. So it was a good thing. I did talk to sort of some friends offline around, we've had 200, and their response was only 200, and I think 200 is a huge amount. I wasn't expecting 2,000, and to some degree I'm grateful that I did receive 2,000, to sort of give those sort of meaningful evaluation of some are offered. But, anyway, that was just my impression of the material that we got. Kudos to the community for taking the effort and pains to craft the material that they did.
Yeah, I too was pretty impressed that there was a range of things that we heard. Some were very succinct. Yes, I agree with this option. That was it. Some were very lengthy and detailed, and quite a few of them provided me with perspectives I hadn't thought of before, which is, I think, really why you go to the public, to get information, so that you can get additional information that you hadn't thought of before, and you can sort of know how many people are thinking this way or that way. Other things that I did, and I know some of you also did, is we visited some schools to sit in lunchrooms to hear what teachers had to say. When you're, a trustee, people know what you look like, and you get approached on the street often, or in the course of your business day sometimes. People will offer you comments with respect to what they think on items. And so I've heard a lot from people. Not that many phone calls, but some phone calls. A lot of comments on the street, and a lot of staff sort of, wondering should they send in an online comment, wondering how they might be viewed as a staff member by doing so, rather just come and say something verbally. And I got those kinds of feedback from staff, again, in the range of the public's comments with respect to this. So while I don't think that I've conducted a referendum or anything by any stretch of the imagination, I think I have a feel for what I think I've heard from the public. So that's sort of what I did to inform myself. Anybody else have Dan?
Well, I guess for me, I only received 2 phone calls at home, which I thought was kind of unusual considering the magnitude of what we're going to be considering. For me, I have run into a lot of people who have been involved in the education system over the years, a lot of retired principals and teachers, almost all of who have a similar opinion. I have 3 children who went through the system. My oldest son was already in Courtney Junior when we went to middle school. My oldest daughter was one of the first that involved in the middle school, and my youngest daughter went through, again with middle schools. I consulted with them and also with a number of their friends who are of that age where their children are now coming into the school system, moving up through. And I have 6 of my 8 grandchildren in the school, ranging from kindergarten to grade 9. For the most part, what I heard was the middle school worked really good. There was a preference towards the middle school from those who were involved in the education system, and from my children and their friends who are still here in the valley. The majority of them are the middle system seemed to work much better for them. Less bullying, a better relationship with cohorts that they were going through, etc. So that's what I've done today. And I also read a couple hundred emails or letters that were.
Anybody else want to jump in with some comments? Yeah?
Okay, I'm fighting the flu tonight, so I don't speak a lot just because I'm afraid, just let you guys know that. I felt really important to be here tonight, but I am battling the flu, so if I feel a bit shaky and not quiet, it's because of that. It's a bad day for me. But I wanted to let people know that I felt very important to be here. 224 emails as of last night came in, and I actually read them, and I read quite a few of them, and I really appreciate the one from the students. I thought they were heartfelt, their thoughts and their concerns were wonderful. I loved a quote from the leadership class, which I like to just mention tonight. They referred to the grade 8s at Valvania High School, and their quote was, "As an analogy of a fish in a pond should never be placed in the ocean without first traveling through a river to get there." And I thought that some of the quotes and thoughts that we had from many of the students and parents were wonderful. The range was mixed, and there was never any one way or the other. I've been a parent and assistant for 25 years. I've had 3 kids go through the system. I've been volunteering. I know a lot of the parents and the staff, and I work in the public. So my input is going from PAC meetings, listening to parents talk, having people know me and phone me up and talk to me. So that's how I've gathered my information. And I would really, I guess one of the one things I really liked was listening to the students and the students' comments. And the comments from the grade 8s were incredible. There were some that loved the system. They were very heartfelt, passionate. And the grade 11s and 12s, it wasn't much more about the grade 8s were there. They were concerned about their future and what the electives and how they get the electives and how the classroom numbers are limiting some of the things that they're looking at. So it was a wonderful exercise, and I'm looking forward to hear what my other trustees say tonight and moving forward there. So I thank you all for coming out tonight too and listening to us. And it's been a nice sunny night with no more snow, and hopefully April Fool's joke is over with us. So that's how I gathered my information. And like I said, the 224 emails, I read them. I took the binders home. Debbie Page was wonderful to give me the binders, and I read them and probably out some of them 3 or 4 times. So I thank you all for that input.
Anybody else want to agree?
Sure, I'll go. Much like what you guys have done, I've read all of the responses to the discussion paper as well. And I have been out in the public, and as Susan pointed out, people know who you are, and they'll seek you out to tell you what their opinion is. And I've made note of all of those. I've been to schools, I've talked to teachers, I've talked to parents, I've been to PACs, I've talked to students, I've talked to grandparents, I've talked to anybody who wants to talk to me, and anybody who has an opinion. And I've listened with an open mind, because really I came into this not feeling strongly one way or the other, just looking for what's best for the children's educational outcome. That's really the point that I'm coming from. And what I really discovered about our beautiful neighborhood is that we are a bunch of passionate, well-intentioned, well-meaning people who feel strongly about the education of our children. And I found in the course of my discussions and reading the papers that there seems to be support for all the options. But the way I see it and the way I have found and what I've heard from people is there seems to be more towards the middle school, support middle school now. And around that, I have some concerns about what I need to be looking at as far as where do we go from here, and I can talk about those later. That's sort of where we're going. So that's how I've got my information. I really immersed myself in it. As a stay-at-home mom, I have lots of time to do that. So that's what I've been doing, is going out and actively seeking input.
Yeah.
Because I organized, excuse me, I organized my thoughts in terms of subtopics, and so I thought I would just address them in that way. First subtopic, to echo what Tom said in terms of the feedback, it was extremely impressive. Aside from it being heartfelt, which feedback is almost always heartfelt, it was very well thought out, and there wasn't a single rant fake, which I thought was just incredible. I too have talked to many people, and again, many people find me. Grocery store seems to be a popular place where people can talk about their views, and the way it's structured, the grocery store in the middle, and a relatively small location, that seems to be a place that many people feel comfortable initiating conversations. As an occupational therapist who works with kids, many are students, they've also spoken to me about their thoughts, and have emailed me as well. So that's been an interesting and different perspective, and have talked to a number of kids. Assuming we are going further in terms of the discussion from here, in terms of grade structure, I think we need to go further in terms of getting input from individuals. We recognize that group representation has its limits, and there have been some issues about questions about whether a group has represented views or not, and that's just the function of how group representation works. So I'd be interested in something along the lines of a survey to go to every parent and every student above a certain age. Grade 6 is what came to my mind. And this way, people who aren't aware of what's going on, because not everyone is interested in the way the system works, but everyone is interested in how the system works for their child. So that might be a way to deal with it. The next topic, focusing on Comox, being a Comox trustee. Unfortunately, much of Comox is not happy with the state of our schools. And that's not universal from every parent, but that's a very clear trend. And then, just again, to quickly highlight changes, dramatic changes in Comox over the last year. Closure of 3 schools, Brooklyn population split among 2 sites, movement of French immersion from Highland to Isabel, transfer of Comox Challenge program, Courtney, boundary change. We saw many Comox students from Aspen diverted from Highland to Isabel to Courtney, and then as well, Aspen being an entirely new school, comprised of students from 3 different elementary schools, raising its own challenges. And also, as a result of changes over the past year, Highland has the unique and dubious distinction of simultaneously dealing with overcapacity this year and what can be disabling under-enrollment in the years to come. And quoting from a letter from a couple of Highland teachers, I think they say it better than I can. Highland's projected to account for 1/3 or more of the declining enrollment for the entire district, with a total district enrollment drop predicted next year for about 350 students. Highland alone is anticipating a drop of 150 students. This is clearly a disproportionate share and cause for considerable concern. With 240 students graduating from Highland in grade 12 this year and only 130 new grade 8 students arriving, in 5 years the school population will drop by 50%. So obviously that situation is untenable, whether we're talking about grade structure or not. Status quo can't work. The next topic, consistency versus variations in grade structure. I've heard a fair bit of input on this topic, and I no longer believe that we need to aim for consistent grade structure across the district, because I think flexibility may allow for the best choices. This is what we've had in the past, which seems to have worked. And further, we do already have exceptions to the general rule in terms of consistency. And again, I'd like to quote the Comox teacher who captured this view better than I think I could. Regarding grade structure, I think that Comox or any other jurisdiction should have the flexibility to have whatever structure works for the student, staff, and physical plan. I think that homogeneity for its own sake is counterproductive and prevents us from making the best use of our strengths. I think that an important point in there is the reference to the physical plans, because we've had in many, many discussions about grade structure over the years. There's been the debate about one versus another versus it doesn't matter. But I think what we do need to remember is that we're not starting the school system from ground zero. We have existing buildings and we're not building any more in the foreseeable future. So I think that's a factor that's worth considering how that factors in. Next topic, I guess I should do
No, go.
can't follow this.
I didn't quite know how long it was.
We got 2 hours.
The next topic, impact on students. I think that there were students in particular grade cohorts particularly adversely affected by reconfiguration last year, and I don't think they should be subject to further upheaval. So, and because of that, I believe that students who enter a given high school expecting to graduate from that high school should do so. And it's for that reason that I can't support closure of a high school unless there's a transition plan that's so gradual that all who enter such a high school at whatever beginning grade level will graduate from it. I think otherwise the impact on individual students is too great. And I don't think the principle of the greatest good for the greatest number is applicable when we're dealing with people, particularly young people, because I don't think we can sacrifice grade cohorts for the greater good. I don't think we should be doing that. In terms of longer-term options, however, I do believe that we may and probably do need to close the high school down the road in order to maintain optimal secondary programming. But on the heels of reconfiguration last year, I don't think that the public have the appetite to do so right now. But I do think if we ultimately make any grade structure changes in the near future, they should be made so that consideration of the 2 high school model can flow from that if we need to go there. In terms of the current situation, the status quo, regardless of grade structure, because I'm defining it as this is our situation, not just the status quo grade structure, it is not a viable option for most, and certainly not most in Comox. The K-7 scenario will increase overcapacity situations in many elementary schools in the years to come, and that's not just in Comox. Secondary schools are going to, if we carry on this way, will suffer either overcapacity or undercapacity scenarios and face scheduling problems because of grade composition of the school. So when you have a school, as someone pointed out in one of the feedback letters, that if you have an 800-student school, what you can offer if you're 2 or 3 grades is very different than if that's spread out over 5 grades. And I think that that's a crucial piece that it is worth keeping in mind, that it's not just numbers, the same way it's not just class size, but class composition matters. School grade, it's not just the number of students, but what grade they're in within the school. So I think we need to do some more work, probably not what people want to hear, more talking, but to do some more work to flesh out new options, taking these factors into account. And in terms of the B, I don't know who that B is, but I'm sure someone has some thoughts about that. And I think the school district would need to prepare, would then need to prepare a detailed analysis of capacity, enrollment projections, taking into account local information, specific cost of implementation, and annual operational costs. And these are all ideas that I've seen from feedback that I've heard or read. And then once we have that information, then we can begin a public consultation process that includes feedback provided to date, because so much of it was so good. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that, if we're going to remove the names and make it public, or if we need to ask people, but I think it would be helpful for people to be able to read it, because it's so good. That consultation process would be the next step, including gaining information from it. If I was making suggestions, would be I'm making suggestions. If I was going to implement the suggestions I made, would include the survey.
I hope that the rest of us will flesh out our thoughts to the degree that you have and that you jump in again later on if you have more to say or comments.
I'm not sure what was expected of me tonight, so I wrote down what I have. As we may possibly move forward on this topic, I'd like to put forth my view from input I've received from the community through emails, meeting with teachers, going through schools, casual conversation, PAC meetings, and the discussion feedback we've received at the board office. I feel there's a fine line between status quo and reconfiguration responses, and after weighing the options, I don't feel that any of these are an option to move forward with, as status quo will be unworkable in a few years without immediate modification. The current boundaries reflect the balance of student numbers for this year at our high schools, but will result in serious imbalances that will make offering sufficient blocks of all courses, electives and academics, impossible at 3 secondary schools. Currently, most of our high schools are offering single blocks of Calculus 12, French 12, English Lit 12, and Band 12, and that's with 240 grade 12 students. Where will we be when our numbers are at half of that in less than 5 years? Our elementary schools, for the most part, are having a more positive outcome, as some schools have moved from older buildings into newer, and having a larger student population, which increases resources available to them, one of them being CSTs. On the other hand, we have schools that are dealing with space issues, lack of computer lab space and time, not enough gym space and time, and how will we plan to introduce full-day kindergarten into our district with some of our elementary schools close to capacity? I do not favor status quo for educational reasons solely. Too many grades in our high schools and not enough students in each grade has compromised the amount of choices. Our senior students are required with such things as mechanics, math, biology, that are needed to graduate with. While knives is a choice for some students, it must not be utilized as a replacement for direct classroom instruction on courses needed for graduation. Status quo does not address the overcrowding issues at our elementary schools, or the uncertainty of a Comox school split between 2 campuses, or the uncertain future Lake Trail is feeling. Status quo does not address the issue of having grade 7s in a junior school while having to stay on an elementary curriculum. Status quo does not address Highland Secondary losing 40% of their population over the next 5 years. Status quo, in my mind, should be considered educationally irresponsible. As for option B or C, I find it difficult to say that I'm in favor of either. The feedback that was received in support of these options was almost split. We need to put aside emotions and attachments to buildings and consider what is best for the student who's in their final year of being a student in School District 71 to the new child starting their academic adventure in kindergarten. We as a community are faced with the challenges of how to meet the needs of every child in the valley, not just our own. We as a board and community need to have a long-term goal for what we expect from public education, not a next year goal. Do we want to settle for mediocrity within our educational system? I'm sure the answer is no. We all need to be open to options that are presently outside the box from the options presented to us in the discussion paper. My request is we arrange an ad hoc committee that is a cross-section of QP representatives, CDT reps from both elementary and secondary, and PBPA reps from both elementary and secondary, to locate the challenges that are happening and will happen in the next 5 years, to help not only the board, but the community as well, to understand the modifications that are required to ensure the educational needs of all our students are being met, and how to have educational equity amongst all schools.
Thanks. Round 2? You want to go with round 2 or?
So that was very enlightening.
Lengthy?
Oh,
So sorry, I said lengthy.
It was very lengthy, thank you for that, lengthy. So I know management over there will start keeping track of all the metaphors that I use and try to keep them to a minimum. So there are a couple of sort of declarations that I feel that I need to make. prior to sort of wading into this. And more importantly for my colleagues here than anybody else who may be listening. One is at the end of this, there will be a vote at the end of tonight. At the end of this process, there will be a vote or a series of votes. And so I just want to unequivocally declare that regardless if I end up in the shallow end of the vote pool, I will support the direction of the board with vigor. So that doesn't mean that I won't engage in spirited conversation about all sorts of things, but in the end, the decision will be the decision. The other thing I want to say to this group, and perhaps also important for the public to hear, is that my deliberation and conclusions are in the context of my being an elected board member. The recent history of the board, the previous board, is well known, and I don't feel it necessary anymore to make any further reference to the former board. My first metaphor, that particular dead horse has been flogged enough. So I sort of like, we've been there and done that, and I haven't heard the previous board being referenced to date or tonight, and I trust that it won't be. I expect, if not demand, that I be held accountable for the decisions that I make as part of this board, and not in relation to what folks who may have sat in these seats before me. So some of the context for my deliberations. One, and it may come as a shock or a bit of a letdown to my colleagues, but I'm no smarter on this side of the table than I was when I was on that side of the table. So I didn't gain infinite wisdom by just ending up on this side of the table. So I'm not any smarter. I also don't view any group as a special interest group. And to suggest that now, as has been suggested in the past, is just like really plain foolish and arguably somewhat lame. Our kids are special, and as parents we have special interest in our children. People have expressed interest regardless of where they come in the continuum, and to categorize them as a special interest group is insulting and should stop. People are interested, and they should be, and that's a damn good thing. I touched a bit on how I inform myself. Certainly the submissions were very interesting to read. I did, by invitation, have discussions with principal, vice principals, teachers group, and students. In fact, being invited to a particular class at Vanier was exceedingly enlightening for me, just to witness. I didn't participate in the discussion, just to witness their discussion. It was interesting. And outside of, also I have sort of my group of friends and acquaintances who I don't refer as the public or my public, or just, my friends and acquaintances, people I hang out with. Other than that, and I wrote this up, finished writing it up early this morning, I had that no one else had contacted me. Well, I have to correct that. At 1:30 today, somebody phoned me. So I actually did get a call from somebody who doesn't fall into the acquaintances or friend category. The submissions, as I mentioned, I was very surprised. Well, maybe that's the wrong word to use. I was pleased at the quality and thought that accompanied the submissions, regardless of where folks stood on the issue. I guess if I may, and I don't think this is really intended for us to sort of provide commentary on one another, but just to bridge a bit on what one of Fran's suggestion around a survey or referendum. That's not where I go in my thinking. I think that the sample size that was provided through the submissions, through the various conversations, gives us a picture of what, in the broad scope, what the community is interested in. And I think, as Laurie accurately said, it's sort of split, big surprise. I do think that as we move further down this fairly long continuum that I'm going to talk about in a moment, we will need to have those more detailed conversations with pockets of folks within our community, if not our entire community. Much like has been mentioned, the status quo was the phrase that was used, and it was used purposefully just to give folks an indication of this looks like what it is now. But to some degree, it's quite meaningless, because the status quo, whether, won't stay the same no matter what. if we continue to operate, as all districts in this province operate, is under a formula that is based on a per head count of students, we will be subject to the ebb and flow of enrollment that will influence, to a large part, if not entirely, decisions that we need to make. So through this process, and the substantive issue for me, and what I felt was, which was sort of poking and prodding the public the most, was what's this board going to do in terms of establishing its platform of doing all the changes that they will need to do regardless. So simply put, is the platform going to be a single transition platform where we do all the changes that, or we deal with all the things that Laurie mentioned, and certainly the things that Fran referenced, or do we go back to some sort of a dual transition, as was the case in previous years? So for me, at this point, it's kind of that simple. And I think that's a piece that we need to bring some clarity to for the community. There are endless hurdles on the horizon. Some are ones that we probably can jump quite easily, and others will be a lot more challenging. What we need to make a decision is, do we do that from a single transition platform or a dual transition platform? So I've been in the Valley since '97 and came here with a little one, preschool at the time, and I confess that I didn't choose to live in this valley because of a double transition system. I didn't. And I didn't choose to live in this valley because of the potential of a single transition system, because, quite frankly, from my perspective then and to some degree now, there is an element of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So it did make a difference to me. And from obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I was a student once. I went through a particular model, which happened to be a middle school model, and it was fine. But I've worked with kids and families for almost 30 years and have helped shepherd children through all different types of educational models. And their success or not has been far less influenced by the model that they happen to be in than by the connections that they have made with their teachers, the support that they receive from their parents, etc. And I don't say that in any way to sort of discount the position that people have taken. I realize that there are folks who fully believe, and I don't begrudge it at all, that one system is better than another. And in fact, if you do a simple thing like Google on the internet, you'll find reams of research that, in fact, says that. But in my humble opinion, and I concede that I certainly have not read all of the research, I probably haven't even read most of it, I don't think that there's a declared winner. And that's a view that I had when I sat out there, and it's a view that I maintain sitting here. But here's the rub for me. If a district chooses to change as drastically as we have, it needs to, at a minimum, demonstrate an operational and a pedagogical imperative to do so. So imperative is like, I need a heart transplant, because if I don't get it, I'm going to die. Imperative isn't elective surgery, even though the elective surgery might improve some things, blah, blah, blah. For me, the imperative is. And when I sat on that side of the room, I didn't see the imperative. And since I've been sitting on this side of the room, I still don't see the imperative. And this isn't an indictment of any of the work that Dr. Kinney's done, or Glenn, or anybody, because I fully concede that the venture that was undertaken was exceedingly complex. But it never met the imperative test. A couple of my own observations. This year the high schools had a minimum of 2 new cohorts, right? Because there were the 8s and the 9s showed up at once, and in Vanier they got some 10s as well. So there's like a big chunk of people who came the first time. And in conversations that I've had with kids and with students, and with teachers and administrators is that if we would ask this question in September, we would have a far different response than the type of answer that we get now. And the response in September would have been arguably significantly more negative. So that suggests a couple things. One is that folks are resilient, which ought not to be news to anyone. And the second is that there's an accommodation that happens by all parties involved. So next year, next school year in 09, there will be a single cohort that will come. So arguably that will make it a little bit easier in terms of some of the dynamics that may have been present at the forefront this year. It won't make it different. It won't solve everything, but it'll make it a little bit different. The other thing to keep in mind is that by 2010, September 2010, which is that's the earliest date that we chose to sort of monkey with the configuration, the current model will be the new normal for a lot of people. And when the discussions took place last year, or the years leading up to the decision made last year, we as a district were sort of pitted with an existing system against an abstract system. So we were all in this system, and we were speculating against an abstract system. And most of us, many of us, and I was certainly part of that group and remain part of that group, thought, man, I like the middle school. It serves us well as a district. And as I said earlier, it never met the imperative test for me. Never saw it, still don't see it. But the reality is that the change was made. And now we actually have two systems that one has a history where people have lived in, and one is now where people actually live in it. Which I think, if we were to move forward in the hypothetical, to say, well, let's go back. Now we're not pitting hypotheticals against one another. We're pitting really two groups of people against one another. And I think we need to be mindful of that. I don't think that's the deal breaker, but we really ought to think about it in that way. And the further extension of that thinking for me is through this process, there were some clear winners and losers. So, and I don't begrudge the winners. There's people and families and kids who are in better environments than they were, and would rail against the notion of circumstances being changed. And do we want to end up with a Hatfield and a McCoy environment with the seven of us playing really, really crappy sheriffs? Right? So I don't know. I don't know if we want to do that. I don't know if I want to do that. So while it unnecessarily, in my view, polarized our community, one consequence of a return to a middle school model may even exacerbate the existing tension that exists. And I feel badly about that. The irony, and again, I'm very much a participant in this, and certainly was a participant in when I wasn't on this side of the table, is as adults, we need to, and I think for the most part, do demonstrate and model for our kids the need to get involved and the need to be passionate about this. But I do worry, and maybe unnecessarily so, but I do worry that now that we have a group of folks who have a history, with a group of folks who have a reality, that it will pit those together as opposed to being a reality and an abstract. The challenges we have are many. Some are known, and probably most are still unknown. So that to suggest in the hypothetical, the decision to keep the current platform of a single-track transition is status quo is just short-sighted and wrong. And I don't see the board escaping the further responsibility we will have to do consultations with the community around all those hurdles that are to come, regardless of what platform we operate. Part of that is, the budget conversations that we will seemingly need to have year after year after year. But a lot of them will also be to try to remedy circumstances, unintended or otherwise, that have arisen by the change that we now find ourselves. So, in the end, where do I stand on this? So, I figure I need to use the same principles that I used when I was arguing against the move to a middle school now. I can't very well in my own mind reconcile how I now start arguing it a different way. So, one leap is for me to move from where we are now, as much as I'm not fond of it, there needs to be an operational, pedagogical imperative to do so. And I don't see that either. Part of this discussion is to either enlighten me to that or to confirm that it isn't there. And then would conclude that the jumping off point for all the changes that we will need to make through the life of this board and subsequent boards will come from that single transition platform.
Good? Yeah? That's the end of it. Okay. So I guess I'll say something now. So, while I was quite a vocal opponent of the past board and obviously disagreed with the decisions that we came to, honest to God, that's in the past. And for me, the new reality started when we were elected. This new board was elected on November the 15th. All I think I ever wanted was for us to sit and have a conversation like this and try to reflect what we're hearing in the community. You know, I don't even care if we disagree. I think that just sitting together and airing all of our views, I feel that we will come to a good decision at the end of the day. And I, too, am happy to live with what we come to at the end of the day. So yeah, my starting point is November. So we have a single transition system in our district. That's what we have. The major piece to me that's come through with all of the feedback that we've received in conversations, to me, is actually sort of in the distant future a little bit. The piece that I really sort of hang all of this on is the 2 or 3 high school piece. Now I was going to look here to see what this says. Honors relationships and prepares all learners for a changing world. To me, that is what we're all about. We're trying to prepare 8,000 kids for a changing world. And so in order to do that, we have to have enough diversity of courses available. And to me, that's about high school. So I'm not thinking about right now where, I don't know, we have maybe 800 kids or something in grade 12. I'm thinking about 5 years from now, or whatever it is. I looked this up. We have 600 kids in grade 6 this year. So when those kids are in grade 10 in 4 years from now, I don't want them spread out over 4 schools or 5 schools. I'd like to see them consolidated into 2 schools. I don't see how we sustain 3 high schools in the long run. I just don't see it. I want those kids to be able to have Physics 12 be available to them if they want to go on to take science in university. I want kids to be able to take a woodshop class that maybe is going to keep them in school because, gee, you know, this is interesting to me and maybe I'd like to become a carpenter. I want to be able to make sure we have all of those options available for kids. So that's my starting point for thinking about this. So obviously, what I'm talking about here is either a 10 to 12 high school or a 9 to 12 high school. And to me, I don't really envision having a K to 8 elementary school or a K to 9 elementary school. So I guess really I am talking about dual transition, but from a perspective to support the smaller cohorts in the high schools that I am absolutely convinced is a very important piece for our kids in the future. So that's the educational value that I see. And so the other night when I was at the DPAC, and they were talking about that the board should not make any changes to the status, to changing the status quo unless there was an educational and financial reason to do so. I completely agree with that perspective. Like I say, for me, it starts on November 15th. So for me, there is a educational imperative to consider making this change to 2 high schools. There are other interesting things that have come along as time has gone by. I would just like to quote from one of our submissions that we received from someone that I know, somebody who I really respect that works in our district, and has had a number of different jobs, and I think has actually great kids that are pretty successful in their lives. And this is what this person says: simply tacking on the grades 7 and 8 to the elementary and secondary schools respectively has failed to adequately address the particular academic and social needs of this age group. It is a critical time of development in the student's life and in their attitude towards education. The potential for a positive and creative educational experience for these students is huge. I know efforts have been made to try to accommodate these students in the present system, but it is extremely difficult to duplicate the sense of connection and community which is possible in a middle school context. Also, these early adolescents are missing an opportunity to gradually take on responsibility and leadership which the middle school affords. I am very concerned that if we continue with the current configuration, we may see the graduation rates drop even more. And this person has put that better than I could. Those are my concerns, and they are my educational concerns for the kids in our district. So I think, can we afford to make this change? So I think about the teachers and educational assistants that we have in the district. What sort of training do they have? Do they have a single transition training and orientation, or is it more geared to a middle school? So looking at our human resources, how do they best work? And I think for years they've best worked in a dual transition model. So I think they could do that again, and I don't see that that would be a cost. Wouldn't cost money to restore that structure for teacher training or anything. I think about the costs contained in the discussion paper as to what it would cost to go back to a dual transition system. And I have to say that and it's not me, I've heard this from a number of people in the feedback, that, well, 2 things about the money. One is if you have to spend a bunch of money, don't do it. 2 is that we don't actually believe these estimates. They seem to be awful high. And I have to admit that I think I fall on the side of, I think they're awful high. $500,000 for resources. I don't know why we would need to spend $500,000 on resources. We had middle schools before. So to me, if we have to spend $500,000 on resources, those must be new resources and would actually represent a new expenditure that we would consider. So I would want to have more information with regards to those resources. Teacher staffing, same thing. I guess, we can establish teaching ratios like we do now. We can establish different ratios in the future if that's our choice. We can move this type of teacher over to here if we like. It's just a choice, and I don't see that that needs to be a cost to the district. I think it could be cost neutral. So I don't believe actually that it would cost $1.3 million for us to go to a middle school model at all. So a few bits and pieces that I've gleaned from listening to the public. One of the things that I believe is important to kids in, say, grade 8 and 9 is that they have an opportunity to take their courses in a linear model, that they have a chance to take math, every day or every second day or whatever. That's the best way for kids of that age group to learn. I've learned that there's going to be a change, I guess, at Vanier, that they're going to take that to a semestered model because it works best there. One of the problems that they identified is if you have a kid in grade 8 that's failing math and they're on the linear system and that's the only subject they need to repeat, then when they go to grade 9, how do they do that? They're now in a semester system in grade 9, but they have a one-year course they need to take. So that was maybe an unanticipated thing that happened with us. So I guess just to wrap up my thinking, to me it is looking down the road to that day when there's only going to be 500 or 600 kids in a particular grade cohort and figuring out how best to support those kids at that time. Some of the things that I completely agree with that I've heard is that I think this should be done on a very slow, measured basis. I think kids that are in high schools now, they want to graduate from that high school. I think we should make every effort to make that happen. I want to protect the good things that have happened in the past few years. Like I would have to say French immersion has blossomed. They've had good things happen with their program, and I think we should find a way to protect that going into the future. We need to protect our cohort size. I don't see that status quo is an option for us. We do need to consider moving forward, but not coming from a place of, gee, we disagree with what the last board did. That's a dead horse. It has been flogged to death. It's in the past. We need to move forward and look forward to how we can best support our students. So that's my 2 cents worth, or 5 bucks worth probably tonight. You want
This
to
is a
say
metaphor competition
something?
between you
It is a
or what?
competition. We already said that.
Well, I guess for me being the oldest guy here on the board, I went to school with no such thing as middle school that I ever heard of. So it was K to 7, 8 to 10, 11, 12. For me, my primary concern here has always been how do we best prepare the students here for this job competition they have to get into when they get out of our schools. And it's a very tight market. It's, for as long as I can remember here, and I've been here since 1975, it's always been a tight competition for jobs here in the Valley. So most of our kids move away. It would be nice to provide a wide array of electives that gives them a chance at taking advantage of different types of careers out there. I honestly don't think we can do that with 3 high schools, with the number of students that are on decline, and definitely not with 4 high schools. So, like I said, my primary concern is how do we provide the programs. I keep hearing if it costs money to go back, you shouldn't do it, and I saw that in a lot of the emails that came through. Well, you can't afford not to change if it's providing an advantage to students in the Valley.
Sure, I'm actually going to be quite brief on this one here. I have more questions than answers regarding the discussion paper. And some of my thoughts are this. I believe that we need to move forward. I think that we need to look at the issues facing the system for the next 3 or 4 years and have a plan to deal with those issues. We need a clear vision and plan to address those concerns, and those being the educational needs of our students and student achievement. How can we meet the needs of all students, as we have students who do not meet the normal goals and expectations of our main school system, whether they are gifted students or struggling students? How do we address the declining enrollment concerns and the impact of Lake Trail and Cumberland Junior? If we remain status quo, Lake Trail will suffer and students will suffer. How do we deal with providing our senior students the rich and varied elective courses needed to move forward and to ensure that they stay in school? And reality is, with the exception of grade 11 socials, grade 11 English, and 12 English, everything else is an elective. So that's a concern with a lot of the students, and that's what I've heard from many students and parents, is in having our students prepared for the future. Despite closing the schools and restructuring, we're still facing a deficit. And I have the other one that says, can we actually afford the financial and emotional turmoil another restructuring will cause? And what is our vision and purpose to restructure? Those are a lot of questions and concerns I have, and I don't have the answers, and I'm really looking forward to listening tonight. Status quo to me is staying on course with Lake Trail, with Cumberland Junior, with Highland, with Banyan, is for being exactly as they are, and not adjusting and looking at the future. And when I looked at the long-term numbers, I looked at Lake Trail's numbers, and they were really alarming. And Banyan, in 4 or 5 years, with grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, having 650 students, those numbers were concerning. And when my children were at Vanier, and I had a son who was there when the population was 1,650 kids to the one who was just last year, and when you look at what electives are available, when you're in grade 12 and you need math 12, chem 12, bio 12, physics 12, you're going to go on chemical engineering and that, those courses are really important. And we have students now in grade 11 that cannot take grade 11 physics. There's no block, there's no timetable for it, so they take it in grade 12. Well, they can't take the grade 12 physics. They want to go to BCIT or engineering, they don't have those courses. These are really, really concerns for me. The one vision I hope as a board we take is we need to have a clear vision and plan in place to meet the educational needs of all students. And whether we stay status quo, what is status quo? Whether we have one high school, two high schools, 3 middle schools, or elementary schools, what would be best for the district? I don't have that clear understanding because we don't know the needs of our students in 2 or 3 years or 4 years from now. And we have to have that conversation. We have the conversations with our community and our parents. And from what I've read from over my 24 years in this district and the last 2 years in this district, is that we really polarized our community. We have those who are for, those who are against. We need to build that bridge again. And whatever decision we make as a board will not be popular with every single person in this. We can't do that. But what we can do as a board is to give everyone a clear understanding is why we are doing it, and the rationale why we are doing it, and the fact that we have listened. And you may not agree with the decisions we make at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, we have the best interest of the students in our heart. My children went to school here for 24 years. My grandchildren are coming into the district right now. So I really would like, whatever decision as a board we make, to reflect those goals, is that we're looking at the best interest of the students, so when they leave grade 12, they are prepared for the future. And then we want them engaged in school. We want them to have a variety of electives, a variety of courses to ensure that. And like I said, I have a lot more questions, and I don't have the answers, and I think the discussions we're having are excellent, and my brain's not working tonight, I'm sorry, so I'm just not feeling very good, so I'm just going to leave it at that, so I apologize if I rambled.
No, I think there's a couple of us that have the market cornered on rambling. Lori, you want to go?
I think the most disheartening voice I heard was a parent who stated that his child would not be able to go to military college next year because he was not able to get into Physics 12 this year at the high school. That concerns me. If we are only offering it one semester a year, there's kids, and I'm thinking personally of my own child who is in the unfortunate scenario of having to take Principal's Math 10 through 9s because of class sizes. If he does not do well, what happens next year if Principals of Math 11 is first semester, and I think, you know what, you should try to do Principals of Math 10 first, but it's next semester. Those are the challenges that we're facing. Some of the comments that the teachers were making when we went to Vanier were very disheartening as well. They were saying they felt that they were doing a disservice to grade 8s. They were concerned about attendance issues. These grade 8s have figured out the system that truancy, there's nobody there to hold them accountable as there was in a middle school. Because that middle school model was smaller, they knew the kids. And they knew the kids that needed that extra bit of support because it wasn't there in the rest of their lives. My big concern is, I think of this boy in grade 12 who's not able to get the course needed to continue on with his post-secondary education, military college or North Island. That's a huge difference there. He must be very disappointed. I think of my daughter who is in grade 8 with half the class size. That scares me.
All right, I may be one of the ones who goes for the rambling award, I don't know, but I will try not to. I actually feel that there's really no wrong or right answer here. And that's largely because we do have wonderful staff and support staff and the students, and I really do believe that they'll make the best of any situation. Where I'm coming from is I would really like to give them the opportunity to make the best of the best situation. And I'm talking from an educational standpoint here. Some of the concerns that I've had since reading the discussion papers and just trying to wrap my head around it, because this is a huge topic and it's got ramifications everywhere, and we really need to get this right. And so I'm coming from a standpoint where I want to get this right. Some of the concerns I have also involve, although our schools may be at capacity, what are our cohort sizes? And I think a lot of us don't really think a whole lot about cohort sizes until your kids hit high school and can't get the courses they want because they're offered every other year. Or, they're offered one semester and not the other. And the courses I'm talking about, a lot of people start thinking I'm just talking about what some people would refer to as fluff courses. Whether it's, he can't get into woodwork. And I've heard this from people, so what if your kid can't get into woodwork? I'm talking about all courses. I'm not just talking about the fine arts courses. I'm talking about your math courses, your science courses. I'm talking about the whole spectrum, history, geography. And do we really want to put children who are particularly driven one way, whether it be the trades or whether it be in an academic focus where they want to go on to post-secondary education, but they don't meet the criteria to get into that post-secondary university, whatever it might be, through no fault of their own, but rather through the fault that we filled our schools to capacity, but the cohorts are too small. The other thing that goes hand in hand with that for me is that your teachers may not get the fluency, the competency in that material. They're only teaching it every other year. How can you expect them to really fully grasp that information every other year and pass it on to your child in a manner that's meaningful and worthwhile, really? And we're talking provincial exams, too. If the teacher isn't fluent and competent and comfortable with the material, how can you expect the children coming to write these exams will be as well? So that for me is one of the really biggies. Another thing that a lot of people talk about is they don't want their kids jerked around from one school to the other, and I get that. I'm a parent. I still have 2 children in the system. I don't want my child jerked around any more than the next guy does. And I really view this process, if we were to make any changes, I see it as a kinder, gentler method. Where, for example, in September of 2010, we decided to go to a middle school model. It might be that the kids in that school are only grades 7s and 8s, and that they would have come from an elementary school. They would have been your grades 6s and 7s that just together moved in. I wouldn't ever think that we would yank the grade 9s back from high school and say, okay, well, you've had a couple of years here, but now we're going to send you back here, because you can't. I don't see it happening. I see it as a kinder, gentler, slower transition. In fact, it takes a couple of years, but it's still begin. It's just the way I look at it, because I'm not here to hurt anybody's child. I really want to look after everybody's child, as I would my own. I have to admit, I do worry about the grade 8s and 9s in the high school environment. We're talking about kids who are coming from a relatively controlled elementary situation where there's a lot of parent reporting, a lot of teacher reporting, there's accountability there. And then you're throwing them into a high school model where there's a great deal of freedom there, and perhaps not the same accountability. And so you're expecting them to go from a place where they're totally controlled to a place where they're expected to be totally responsible for themselves, their actions. Like Lori said, talking to some of the teachers, they've noticed that despite their best efforts, and I put none of this on the staff, I think they've all done a wonderful job, but despite their best efforts, there are children who are falling through the cracks here, and their increased in truancy rates we've seen, they have decreased support given to some of these kids. I think some of these kids probably are losing out on personal growth and leadership opportunities that they would have been afforded in a smaller, more secure environment. And while we've heard from a lot of grade 8 students that they're very happy, I'm glad that they are, because that's where they're at. I'm glad that they are. I've heard a lot of students who are having that same experience as a grade 8 student. Kids who are still afraid, kids who are being bullied, kids who are no longer involved in the school that they used to be in, refusing to join sports because they hear that they might make cuts, or whatever it might be. I mean, some of these things seem trivial to us, but are pivotal to children in their development. So these are important years, these grade 8, 9 years. I've also talked to some grade 8 students, and this kind of surprised me, who are really happy to be in high school, and please, whatever you do, don't take me out of this environment. But looking at the kids coming up behind me and knowing that I've had it here at middle school, I can tell you if I had to come straight here, I wouldn't be happy. It's overwhelming. It's a big atmosphere. You're a little fish in a big pond. It's easy to get lost. It's easy to get overlooked. And frankly, we don't get to develop and grow up slowly. Now I feel like I've grown up overnight, is what I've heard when I'm talking to some of the grade 8 students. That concerns me. I think we're robbing our kids. They grow up too quick now as it is. I've got 2 that have graduated already. I probably shouldn't have said that in a public forum, because I'm more older than I am, but I would agree. And 2 who are coming up who are, I'm afraid, going to have to grow up faster than their siblings do, and I feel bad for them if that's the case. Another thing that I actually read a lot about was people were worried about too many transitions for children, too many transitions for children. And while I agree that for some children transition can seem daunting, life is full of transition, and kids, by the time they get to a point where they need to transition in school, have already gone through a lot of transitions. You know, whether it's from diapers to toilet training, whether it's from a bottle to the cup, whether it's from your home to kindergarten, life is full of transition. It's actually what helps kids grow. Without transition, the kids will never grow. And so I'm not so sure that that is where we need to lay our hats. I think we need to look at the educational benefits versus, you know, I don't want my kids to go to 2 schools their entire life. Many of us, myself included, I'm a military brat. I transitioned a lot. I think I turned out okay. I've experienced every trace of the location.
Just that, can we have a motion?
Can we vote on that?
I
said no motion.
And so sometimes I think that we as parents have a harder time with change than our actual children do, and that maybe sometimes some of the stress that kids are feeling around change comes from us. I think we need to be mindful of that. I do have questions about the money issue. I know we need to be fiscally responsible. We're doing things like operational reviews to see what we can find out about efficiencies in our own house. I too have questions about, you know, why is it going to cost us basically twice as much to go back to the system that we once had than it did to move to the system we currently have. I question the whole resource thing. Why is it going to cost so much of the resources? I kind of figure they must still be out there, or else our kids are making up things on the fly. I don't really know about that one. So I think that's a question that I grapple with. I think after all is said and done for me, I think we still need to explore this further. I'm not happy with any of the options as presented. I think we need to flesh those out a little bit better. We are a diverse community, clearly, and clearly right now are not functioning under a single model. We have 7, 8, 9, 10, actually 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in Cumberland right now. We have an 8 to 10 in Lake Trail. We have Brooklyn campus divided between 2. So clearly we are not a unified model. And so maybe what we need to be doing is thinking outside the box, thinking about the communities that we're talking about here singly, and then in the big picture district-wide. Perhaps it's not going to be a one model fits all kind of a deal, and perhaps it shouldn't be, because each of our communities have their own needs and their own types of students, and maybe we need to look at it from that point of view as well. We need to be very mindful, of course, that emotions run high and that exhaustion is indeed a factor. But I think we really need to look beyond that to see what's best for the education of all of the students in School District 71. We have to look beyond the buildings, beyond the politics, and do what is actually right for the benefit of all students, educationally speaking, in the school districts. And that's my answer.
Mr. Bramble, thank you. Mr. Bramble. Anybody else want to defend for round 2? No? Okay. So maybe I'll just make a few observations here. Actually, there's somebody sitting in this room who I should have asked to help me with putting thoughts together from the board, but I was remiss in doing that. Next time I'll know better. Here's some stuff that I heard. Timing of changes. I didn't hear anybody saying, if we make changes, we need to rush to do that. We have a need to do that quickly. And I think I heard 5 people say that we need a long-term vision. That's what I think I heard there. I don't think I heard anybody say that we need to stay with the status quo, but I didn't hear anybody clearly, or a group of people clearly saying, let's go back to middle school. What I think I heard was, we need to make some changes, identify some issues that are important in our district, and I think we have articulated some of those, and that we need to talk about that some more, maybe through a committee with partners involved with that discussion, and then take it out to the public and see what they think about that. And does anybody disagree with what my
I would have told you by now. Kids.
Okay, no, I just jumped in. I heard a number of people saying they're worried about pitting groups of people against each other and having, like Tom says, the Hatfields and the McCoys, that whatever we do, we have to be really mindful that we're not polarizing the community, and that we're worried that people are approaching exhaustion, but we still need to look forward to a long-term vision to do what's best for students. Now, I don't know if this is my own personal bias, because my big deal is cohorts, but I'm pretty sure I heard almost everybody say that cohort size for kids is a big deal. For high schools, to make sure they have a variety of topics or courses available to them every year, to make sure that teachers teach them on a regular basis.
I didn't say that.
No, I don't have you down here.
But I have no quarrel with that.
Okay, and I don't have you, I have everybody else down here but you on that one. But also, I think I heard people express a need to keep elementary schools at a size that it's going to work to make sure we maintain elementary schools. I didn't see anybody saying we should rush to close more schools, I don't think. Didn't really hear definitive on 2 or 3 high schools. I think what I heard most people say is that we don't have to have consistency in the district. That we're open to out-of-the-box things. And then some issues with regard to space in elementary schools right now, a concern that we might need to do something about cramped quarters in some elementary schools, and also concerns about social environments that kids are going to school in. That's kind of the main points I think I took from what we've said so far.
Right. Just to add or clarify a
Please.
couple things. So the discussion around the high school, I didn't hear anybody mention if we go from, I appreciate, make sure it was still considered, but if we look at the 3, the Isabel, Daniel, Highland, I didn't hear anyone say which 2. I heard just the number 2, and I think that's important for us to make clear tonight, because part of certainly the feedback that we received about the high schools, the secondary schools advocating for themselves, understanding for themselves, students and whatnot, that if we are in fact, the reality is that we're driven there because of the cohort size, which may very well be the primary reason, or the singular reason for us doing so. That the conversation tonight isn't reflective of it'll be these 2 high schools or not this high school. So just more for the public to hear. That would be a whole other.
That's a different discussion.
Whole other discussion.
Any other observations? So now the interesting bit is not having a clue what we were going to hear here this evening, where we go to from here. People have some educational concerns. We need maybe a bit more information. Thoughtful stuff tonight. Well,
So I think that for our next board meeting, and again, I don't want to overplay some of my sentiments around the process, is that my feeling is that the public wants as much clarity around as much that we can offer now, so that we have, that there's a clear understanding of what's the starting line, like what's the context from which all these very good troublesome issues are that we're going to have to deal with. So I sit here, and part of my worry is that we have this conversation, and that's good. But if we don't have at least a milestone of some sort of a decision, and I may be way off base with this, but I think that the perception that we may leave is that while we may be working, we're still viewed as spinning our wheels, and anxiety, probably the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway, the anxiety or uncertainty in the community continues. And we know what uncertainty does in terms of ramping up rumors and stories. They'll just manifest themselves in a fairly fashionable, interesting way if we don't. So I don't know what
Well, I think the anxiety for any kind of change is going to be there. But knowing how this board feels and how they've expressed the fact that it's not going to be today it's this and tomorrow it's that, as it has been in the past, that a gentle and gradual transition will be done, if anything is done, should take away a certain amount of that anxiety.
yeah, I think I heard a lot of comments with respect to that, like, I think, Fran, you were the one that said that, kids that are in a particular high school now should be able to flow through and graduate. I don't know that we would all agree with exactly that, but I don't think I heard anybody saying we need to do something fast. I also didn't hear anybody say, let's go back to what we had in the past. I think what I heard is people looking forward, I think. And so maybe, yes?
So maybe, in using that as an example, maybe the past that we can entities are transparent and provide the public with some confidence that we have guideposts is at least establish some principles or some givens. Can we make a statement of givens that if any changes happen, for example, no child in a high school, no student in a high school will be displaced. Again, I don't know if that's the one, but I just feel personally a need to be able to report out on something. I appreciate your point, Danny. I think you're right on. But there's a few folks here tonight, and there's 3 people watching on the internet. And then there'll all right, 8 people, and then there'll be reporting, right? That'll come out, and that will generate. And again, very respectful of the media, but they don't provide a transcript of this. God no, they don't provide a transcript. So I mean, it will generate something out there. And as I'm looking for some opportunity in the not too distant future to at least close a loop or two that provides some clarity and some confidence or some certainty around what we will be doing and perhaps not be doing.
Well, I think one thing, a loop we could close, is to say, I think personally that we're not going back to exactly the model that we had in the past. I don't think I heard anybody saying that.
And we've never had a consistent model in this district since I've been here, so
No.
it doesn't have to be all the same.
And I think that's a consistent thing, is that it doesn't have to be all the same in every area. And that was an interesting thing to me, actually, that a lot of people said that. That was, no matter which sort of side of the issue, the sort of pyramid they were on, they said, we're okay with it being different in different areas. I think that's a loop we can close. Does anyone?
So something for us to consider for for the April 24th meeting in motion language
In motion language?
for the 24th.
If you're reading more ideas, she's using too much of those things.
I'm trying to keep track.
Wallpaper.
Well, maybe the motion isn't the way,
Wallpaper.
maybe the motion isn't the way to make that declaration. But in some way, if in fact what you're saying is felt by the majority, somebody affirming that.
Well, I don't know, I think we might consider at our next public board meeting, having a motion on there that states that we are going to form an ad hoc committee of the board to look at some of these issues in greater depth and to make plans for how best to support some of these things in the future. While we all seem to, except for you, express concern about cohort size, I've never taught a day in my life in a school, and neither have any of us, so I'm not exactly sure what the right size of cohort is. I'd like some feedback on that personally, and that would drive how I might vote in the future as to how many high schools I think we have. So for me, that's just an example. So I think it would be worthwhile to strike a committee.
So I feel the need to respond again.
Thank you.
To the cohort, while it wasn't in my submission, I have no issues with in full agreement with the comments that were made.
I can add your name to that list there.
Yeah.
Okay, so then all of us have that concern. So I think it is worthwhile to strike a group and talk about that some more. I think we have got some pretty good experts in the district to help us. There's some people that are in the public that I think I would like to invite to the table to have a discussion about that issue. I think that's what we should do. That should be a motion that we have on our next board meeting. Have a committee to flesh some of this stuff out. Do we need to have maybe a motion that says we are not going to consider any changes for September 2010 and just like make it into a motion? Make it, 2009, make it black and white sort of thing. Okay, you're declaring for sure, so nobody can misunderstand us.
I would say yes, but thought we'd already done that.
Well, we said it, but we've never put it in a motion and said that we are actually quite definitive about this.
So I'll make the motion. That for September 2009, school year 2010, status quo as it is remains the same with no changes. No drastic changes.
That was my motion.
Well, there's a motion on the floor, and so we were not intending to...
I'm second for discussion.
Okay, there you go. See, there it is. That's the way it works, right? Okay. Somebody want to speak to it?
I brought it forth for discussion. We had that conversation today. It would be a really good conversation.
Okay.
So I just, we used the word status quo. We hammered on the phrase status quo during our submission, and we used the status quo in the motion. So I think that's just, I know what you're wanting to say, but I just think it's not the right word, and I don't want to tie management's hands because we're going to need to make adjustments because it's just how business happens. So it needs to be, I think, framed in a way.
Please reframe it if you're friendly.
No grade structure change for the 2009-2010
So
school year.
significant grade structure change?
No grade structure change. Because we currently have it.
What do you think, Jazz?
No.
I'm okay with family motion, family amendment.
Tom?
Sure.
Okay, so then there would be a motion that there would be no grade structure change for 2009-10. Agree, and then Fran.
I think I can't support the motion knowing that we have some issues in Cumberland right now that are cropping up that we need to have a discussion about. And what I'm talking about is the number of grade 7s there. We've got a motion that grade 7s will be moving over to Cumberland Junior. The problem is there's 33 of them. It's too big for one class. So they're talking about 6-7 splits. That would be moving over, but I know the parent group is not in favor of that. So we need to discuss further options about what we're going to do to satisfy the needs of Cumberland.
Fran?
And I have the same concern in terms of language that would encompass more than we want it to encompass because of both Cumberland but also Brooklyn. The plan is to move to, for next year, in terms of the site, K-4 as opposed to K-5. So those sound like grade structure changes, but those are changes made with management, school, and the Brooklyn community for that's for the school. So that would be contrary to the wording of the motion. So
That one I probably dispute because it's one school on two campuses
Yeah.
out there.
Me too.
I don't think that's as much an issue as what probably Cumberland is.
but the very fact that it's disputable would make me not want to support the motion, not wanting to open up an issue that's not necessary.
Okay, we're gonna be, guess we gotta put the word significant back in there then.
Okay, we could make a motion that says something like, we will be retaining a single it's not a
Yeah.
transition model either. What it is.
We're not gonna do anything.
Jordan,
if
the
there's-
long-suffering Jordan, an hour and a half, he's quiet.
Just to speak to the current status of the district, I think it's pretty well known in our community and in our district that there are no big changes for next year. Today, starting early this morning, we actually staffed the entire district for the fall to the greatest extent possible. So I think it would come as a great shock that there wouldn't be any huge surprises. There are some minor adjustments needed, and I would appreciate us still being able to have that flexibility and leaving the board that flexibility to deal with emergent issues for the moment changes.
So would you say, based in your opinion on our discussion this evening, is it pretty clear that we are still on that path and we are not going to do a major overhaul for September?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we'd be sprung up.
We've literally, just to elaborate a little bit, right, every position in the district, every teaching position that we believe exists for September, virtually was filled.
And that was important for the board to make sure that we gave you prior motions to make sure that that could happen and make sure that there was no upheaval, unnecessary upheaval for teachers and other staff. So, well, maybe that being the case, we don't maybe need a motion then.
Actually, motions on the table, so the thing is just to delete the
You
motion.
could withdraw.
Or I can withdraw it if the seconder wants to withdraw it with me.
Okay, so I think this is about as good a declaration as we're going to get that, you know, we trust you if there's some tweaking required, especially with respect to Cumberland or with Brooklyn, that we'll hear from you or however that will take place. So that's pretty clear intent. Okay, so somehow we got to move this forward. What about a committee to discuss this further? Not just board members, but Lori?
I'd like to make a motion to arrange an ad hoc committee of QP members, a cross-section of QP members, cross-section of CBTA members of both elementary and high school, and our PBTAs, both elementary and high, and members of the public.
Second motion.
Is there any discussion with respect to that?
And members of the public, there's broad interpretations, include partner groups and
Okay.
PAC, for example, which wasn't in the list.
I think it extends beyond that.
No, I know it extends
Oh.
beyond that, but it is inclusive of
Yes.
that.
Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
We're not, usually we identify them.
I guess I've been chair.
Yeah, my expectation would be that there would be DPAC represented. Also, we have some councils in the district that represent significant portions.
AEC, yeah.
The Aboriginal Education Council, the French Advisory, there are significant groups. Janice?
Just a quick question as to the membership would be appointed by the board to report to the board, and would be a time frame. So just a clarification as to how the members would be chosen, appointed or by the purported persons appointed or in report to the board. So just a time frame, that would be kind of questions I'd have regarding the committee.
need to make those?
No, I just, that's what I'm gonna have.
It would be an ad hoc committee of the board, so the board would go about figuring out who we would invite, and I guess somehow co-chair it, probably with maybe Jordan and Sherry or something, and build, this is pretty open motion, that we could add people as we saw fit. I mean, it is to inform the board, right?
Just more clarification, thank you.
I think my concern is this, we won't be able to go in depth before our next board meeting.
No.
So any type of chance of coming to a motion with this won't happen at our April meeting.
Sometimes things need to take as long as they take. Did you have your hand up on that? Yep.
I think another concern, which is one that I started out with, is I still want to capture what individual people think and would support the idea of an ad hoc committee, but do want it to go further in terms of getting to individual parents who aren't interested in their process. Like there are many parents aware of this. This was a theme in the feedback that many people don't know this is happening, and many students don't know that this is happening. And I think as many committees as we have, I think that won't really capture all of the people that are unaware, and then we'll be shocked that this discussion has been continuing for weeks and months, or I haven't said years, but
Well, please God,
not a lot of. So I'd like, I know you commented about that, Tom, that you didn't think it made sense to go that route, and I don't know what other people thought. And again, this was in the feedback, and it was in the feedback.
Again, just to clarify, mine was on a specific broader issue about particularly the single versus the dual transition, to get more feedback around that, if that's a decision that we're going to make. On the more discrete other hurdles, many other hurdles, then absolutely it needs to be a very robust, consultative process to go over to get opinion.
any other comments with respect to establishing a committee? Okay, Debbie, what have you got for a motion?
Okay, let's create an ad hoc committee of the board that includes all partner groups and members of the community. Would that work?
Here. So it's an ad hoc committee of the board, so that's the implication. Okay, any further questions or comments? Fran?
Do you need to clarify for what purpose?
Yes. Okay, yes, from Len over there. Further explore grade structure? I don't know. Personally, I don't like that, because I don't actually think that that's what it's going to end up being about. To me, it's, yeah, we have to figure out what platform we're going to do stuff, but it's to identify issues that we have in the district that we feel need addressing. Personally, I don't think it's a committee where we're going to debate should we have a 6 to 8 middle school model or status quo. That's not what I'm thinking. Lori?
But I'm just wondering, how are they going to decide what the challenges are if we don't give them some sort of direction? Like I'm thinking, Mr. Piercy's letter in the paper was one high school, 11, 12. Is that doable? Is 3, 10 to 12 doable? Or 3, 9 to 12 doable? I think we need to have some kind of direction where to get more answers. I think if we just go like this, that's what we're going to get, and we're not going to be, like Tom says, we're just going to continue spinning our wheels. I think we need some kind of direction on, kind of like what Jordan did for us initially was, here's 4 options. Okay, now we have to delve deeper and go, okay, this is what we need. Can this fit in this?
So I know, I saw Lynn nodding, saying we need we need clarity, but I think for an ad hoc committee, if we identify the broad themes, it's a committee of the board, and the board will instruct those themes, and they will evolve and change over a period of time. So if we were to delineate in a motion this, and this, then that precludes discussions about this and this, that might also be. So I'm okay with the motion as it is. Mr. Rich may disagree. Fran might as well.
I may say, well, I should I think that we have fairly good sense of the themes and issues, and I don't know that we need to have another committee to talk about those in isolation. My thinking would be that it would be a solutions-based committee that fleshes out the options, and that is a full circle when I talk about wanting to somehow that we should flesh out options and didn't know who we was. There's an answer, and ad hoc committee with partner groups, and that the purpose would be to flesh out options that would ultimately go to the public. Because I'd be concerned about, we could talk about the issues forever. And the ad hoc committee may or may not come up with solutions, but if that's the mandate, then it will.
I'm good with that. Len?
Well, I was just thinking, actually, if I could, the actual motion about what we were going to discuss, maybe that was the wording I was looking for, grade structure, like a committee to study grade structure and the feedback around that. That would work better. Just a suggestion.
I'm just thinking with taking the feedback we have on this, people that have said status quo doesn't really exist. If we go down that status quo road, we're going to be in trouble. And I think when the public's thinking status quo, it's something different than what it has to be. Status quo to me means modifications. I think status quo to some people that wrote in, it was leave this damn thing alone, don't touch it again. And I think if we give that to our partner groups, I think we're kind of hitting at the wall with that wording. I'm just concerned.
Yeah, I think for me too, I've moved past that. I don't hear us saying that we should keep it status quo. I think that we are saying we do want to make some changes to protect things like cohorts in the future and to protect school communities, and we need to have some solutions developed. We're not happy with the solutions as they exist, and based on the feedback we've gotten from the public, it's not as simple as saying it's a 6 to 8 middle school model or something. It requires more work, and that could be accomplished at that committee. I call it a solutions committee.
Yeah.
Len's going to share it.
Poor guy.
So what have we got there, Debbie?
Create an ad hoc committee of the board that includes all partner groups and members of the community to further explore grade structure.
That's what the motion is. So do you want to provide more feedback on it? Do you want to vote that motion, or?
We're trying to make sure.
I'm okay with.
We'll wait for you. It's okay. You okay with that motion?
I'm okay with making that motion. This is
Okay.
an ad hoc committee, and lots of things that we talked about. I have clarity that it's within the broad envelope of structure of our district.
Yeah. You guys? Okay, so we're going to vote on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so I think that there's a new tool that Jordan has talked about using, and that is for us to use our website and to have a blog on there to have further discussions. And I would suggest that maybe as trustees, what we ought to do is somehow start using a vehicle like that to flesh out exactly what we want this committee to talk about, and to flesh out some timelines. And we ought to do it awful quick so we don't leave the public hanging for weeks on end, so that we have something that we can bring to our next board meeting and have a further discussion on it and make sure those are the next steps that we wish to take. That would be closing the loop, I think. I hope you're all okay with that, because I think that's what we ought to do.
So if someone who's not computer savvy, you're going to show me how to do that, right?
Yeah. I think we ought to be using the computer a little more. We had the students say maybe a Facebook site for kids to provide feedback.
Yeah, just along the same vein, because we normally post all these responses. I just wanted to make sure that that was okay too.
The responses that we received from the public, I think we ought to talk about that, because there is some identifying personal information
We
in
could
there.
take all that off.
Yeah, that's not just for people's names, but personal things they've told us about something that happened with their kids or whatever.
So I think it's really fun. I mean, I want to do that, but it's not something that we declared formally when we asked people to submit. And like we had 5 submissions, we did pull up 5 people.
Yeah.
But we've got 200, and then also groupings of tagged onto that. So I don't know. I can't assume that all of those folks would be confident that the material would be sanitized enough to their, and I'm betting the farm that out of 200 some are going to get a couple wrong,
Yeah.
and that's all it'll take. I know it's But I mean, the tag to that is I don't want to lose what, there's really good stuff in there. On the continuum, and it needs to be, you need to be able to pull it, transport it into the ad hoc discussions. Maybe a non-identifying within that group is different or better than just posting it all on the website. I don't know. I'd like to make it available because it's really good stuff. But we didn't make that clear when we asked for the submission. Or did we?
No, I think we did. Because initially it was anonymous.
Brad?
There's some easy computer trick that someone could use to email everyone, but not, so everyone wouldn't have a copy of who it was being emailed, so they'd be the only recipient with a simple question like this made public.
Just one way.
You could send it, there's email addresses, I believe, on most of them. Somebody could go click and send an email to every single one of them. There are some there that have no information. Yeah.
But it's a balance because the
Yeah.
information gained is,
Very relevant.
it's very good and it's so much of it is something you can
Yeah.
I could maybe just ask for a show of hands even in the room.
Probably could. Jordan's got something to say about this?
Well, really, I have 2 pieces. One is the advantage of the public seeing feedback is the public gets to see feedback. As the board has done a synthesis tonight, and the public has not had a chance to see that. So the downside is protecting confidentiality. It's something we can work with Deb to come up with some ideas back to the board about how we might deal with that. The second piece of the question I had is just thinking about the April 28th meeting and the formation of an ad hoc committee. Is it the expectation that that committee would be formed by the 28th? Or is it that we would come back on the 28th with, here's an idea of what the invitations will look like on for that committee, and here's some suggested timelines for when that committee would meet? The reason I ask is the board, and I would encourage you to think about it by the 28th, is the timeline for any decision starts to move fairly quickly. We said today we did staffing. That starts in January. So January 2010, sorry, lost a year there, come fast. And we start, I look at Steve Stanley was in the back of the CPK, the planning committee for how we staff the district starts in November at the absolute latest. So there's this timeline looming out there, and I know the board is aware of that, but another thing to be able to communicate by April 28th or fairly soon, that if there is going to be this committee, well, there is going to be this committee. You talked about fleshing out the criteria, but then what is the timeline for their work, and what does that look like? Because I'm hearing that that committee would do some work, and then there would be a subsequent round of public consultation, yet to be defined. But that's the sense I get at this moment. Just put that out there for you to think about for the 28th, because it gives you some time to be clear on that.
I think we'll probably have to meet a little bit and talk about this online, in person, whatever. Okay, so anybody have any concluding comments? Well, since I like having the last word, I think I'll say something. That I was a little apprehensive, I have to say, coming to this tonight, that it would be a bit uncomfortable for us to sit here and have a conversation in a fishbowl with a bunch of people listening to what we had to say. And I was also aware of, you know, as were all of you, what sort of feedback we received, and it wasn't, you know, really clearly one way or the other. And so I thought that this would be a bit of a, you know, here and there conversation, and I think we've done actually quite well with it. We have pulled out some themes, and I'm glad about that. And clearly we're not moving ahead at lightning speed. We're going to take our time, and I'm glad that we are going to invite some more participation from people that work in our schools to give us that information, and knowledgeable people in the community. And yeah, I look forward to further discussions personally with respect to this. And thank you all for your preparation for tonight. I know it's been a lot of work, and as you figured out, it's going to be a lot more work. So thank you very much, and thank you for the public, for all of you, for attending and caring about this issue. I know I recognize many people out there, and that you've given us feedback from many different sides, and we really have appreciated that, and look forward to hearing from you lots more as we proceed. So thank you. Have a good evening. Need a motion to adjourn, I guess? No. Second? Second. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.